Good morning. I want to talk to you about a phrase that I have never said before, so I've certainly never talked about it or preached about it before, and it comes from C.S. Lewis, and it's called chronological snobbery. I kind of like that. It sounds like something that C.S. Lewis would say. So I'm getting some stuff here today from a book called Another Gospel by Alyssa Childers. And I think it's an excellent book. It's kind of apologetics. She had kind of a crisis of faith. I would highly recommend it. I think it's very good. So she's talking about some progressive people who are into progressive Christianity, who it would be quite a bit different than historical Christianity and not really always tethered to Scripture, or not in the same way. So here was the statement by an author that was kind of concerning to me because I remember reading one of his books. And he says this, she says, the problem with his position is that there is nothing but our own personal sense of right and wrong, which will most often be informed by our cultural assumptions, to judge what is right and wrong in the Bible. So it's one thing when it's kind of like, okay, yeah, it's just my own personal choice as to what's right and what's wrong. But when I'm sitting back and judging Scripture to say, well, this was right, but this was wrong. Obviously, there are things where it's just recording what happened. It's not making a value judgment. But that's not what they're talking about here. They're talking about ethical teachings of Scripture. So C.S. Lewis talks about chronological snobbery. It's actually not the simplest thing to say. There's a lot of O's in there. He described it as the uncritical acceptance of the intellectual climate common to our own age, and the assumption that whatever has gone out of date is on that account discredited. In other words, the way we think today is the right way to think. And so he raises some arguments with that. He says he encourages good thinkers to ask questions like, why did this idea go out of date? And then also, was it ever refuted, or did it simply become unfashionable? And if so, who refuted it? How? Why? It's about having the humility and intellectual honesty to admit that the time we now live in is also a period of history of the world. We, like all people who have gone before us, are influenced by our cultural paradigms, societal norms, and collective intellectual assumptions. Just because our culture has come to a consensus on something does not make it true or right. Just think about a lot of different things that have happened in history. So I can remember when I was going to college, those many years ago, and I can remember like the ideas that would come up. One of the big areas that was new, it was secular humanism. And so as a Christ follower, that was challenging. I'd just become a Christ follower, and I really enjoyed my time at George Williams. But I had a friend there, and he was in a class, I don't know if it was philosophy or what it was, but the professor stood up and said, there are no absolutes. And my friend raised his hand and said, that is an absolute. That's an absolute statement. To say that there are no absolutes is contradictory to itself. We live in a time where I think a lot of us get it, that things that we used to think were right are now wrong, and things that used to be wrong are now right. It's a unique time. A long time ago, we used to talk a lot about relativity, where it's kind of like, well, there's a lot of shades of gray. It's like, I think we've moved beyond that. But let me close with a story that I got from my mom, and I've used many times, and I feel badly because when she told me, I didn't laugh out loud. I liked it, and I've used it, and if we had the laugh track, we would use it after this. So the story goes like this. A guy is sitting there, he's coming up on a stop sign, and he just rolls it. We used to call it California stop. He rolls the stop sign, doesn't come to a complete stop. There's a police officer sitting right there, comes over, pulls him over, rolls the window down. He says, you know why I pulled you over? He goes, yeah, well, I guess. He goes, you saw me. The officer's like, you saw me, I watched you do it. He goes, well, I slowed down. He said, really? He said, yeah, I did. I slowed down. He said, okay. So then he pulls out his nightstick. He starts bopping him on the head. And he says, now do you want me to slow down or do you want me to stop? See, there's a difference between the two. And in our age, we need to be critical thinkers, and we need to ask the questions of why have some things gone out of fashion? Did anybody disprove them? We need wisdom. That's my prayer for you today.